In isolated areas of the African plains, an animal endures today whose prehistoric appearance evokes the past. Like elephants and hippos, rhinos were far more abundant during the Ice Age. Millions of years ago, a rhino lived who was as slender and fast as a horse. Though today's are not quite as agile, they can still make an impressive charge when threatened. Rhinos have poor vision and are unable to detect a moving object more than 100 feet away. Their eyes are placed on either side of the head, so in order to see forward, they must look with one eye and then the other. This trait, combined with their relatively small brain, causes them to be easily startled and has given them a reputation for unprovoked aggression. Though rhinos have survived for millions of years, they are now under grave threat from man. Today, the 5 living species of rhinos survive in dwindling numbers, but their long-term fate remains in question. Millions of years ago, hippos lived in forests and were much smaller than today's 3-ton average. But as forests gradually gave way to open plains, hippos moved out of the forest and into the water. By the time of the Ice Age, hippos had already acquired their unique skin structure. Because their skin dehydrates quickly, they spend most of the day in water, leaving only at night to feed in the grassy meadows nearby. They are slightly denser than water and can easily walk on the bottom of riverbeds for up to 5 minutes at a time. Their reliance on water is part of a trade-off from their past. When they moved from the forest to the lakes, they gained access to a greater food supply. But in so doing, they lost their sweat glands and are now forever tied to the water. Today's hippos are fully adapted to aquatic life, with eyes, ears, and nostrils placed on top of the head. By barely breaking the surface, they know everything about their surroundings. As their Ice Age ancestors did, dominant bulls maintain exclusive mating rights in their territories and defend them rigorously. Their razor-sharp lower canines are up to 20 inches long and can inflict severe damage. As evening approaches, groups begin to come ashore for feeding. They'll walk along their regular trails to their favorite pastures and may not return until morning. In a nearby lake, ancient predators defend their nests. Crocodile evolution spans more than 200 million years, qualifying them among the most enduring animals on the planet. During the dinosaur era, the largest known crocodile was over 35 feet long, with a 6-foot head and razor-sharp teeth. Today's crocs average about 16 feet, but they still possess many of the same traits as their predecessors. As they did here during the Ice Age, female crocs come ashore to lay their eggs. After about 3 months, the female uncovers the nest, allowing the eggs to hatch. To ensure their safety, she gently picks up each hatchling with her teeth and holds them in the pouch of her mouth. It was once believed that mothers ate their young, and it still seems a precarious situation for the youngster. Carrying as many newborn and unhatched eggs as she can, she makes her way back to the water. Here she will release the hatchlings, and then gently crack open the remaining eggs by swishing them from side to side in her mouth. Just as they have done through countless generations, the remaining hatchlings on shore make their way down to the water's edge. They do so just in time, as the nest is now under attack by an army of ants. There are many other perils for young crocs and their mothers to face. A nest must be defended with vigilance if its eggs are going to survive. But today, as during the Ice Age, it is estimated that only 2% of all crocodile young make it to adulthood. The first few weeks of life are full of risk, and the young stand the best chance of surviving by staying close to mom.
Through the ages, they perfected the art of pack hunting and can bring down prey 5 times their size. Wild dogs on the hunt when wild discovery continues.
Are written all over your face. Neutrogena Healthy Skin Anti-Wrinkle Cream is clinically proven to start visibly reducing them in only 1 week. Neutrogena Healthy Skin Anti-Wrinkle Cream, recommended #1 by dermatologists.
Discovery Channel, Wild Discovery Ice Age Survivors.
Appreciate the earth-shattering sound you get when we install a 12-inch subwoofer in your car.
You're watching the Discovery Channel. Explore the future of lockdown on the inside of prison tech next.
Who's asking about Viagra? Someone you might expect, and also someone that maybe you wouldn't. In fact, you may be surprised at who's talking to their doctors about Viagra. So ask your doctor if a free trial of Viagra is right for you. Who's asking about Viagra? Maybe it should be you.
Now get the Wall Street Journal delivered for 13 weeks at just 57 cents a day, or 25% savings. Call now, 800-521-1400. That's 800-521-1400 for the Wall Street Journal.
Hello, Meteor.
Hello, Meteor.
Have you heard about the website called Discovery.com?
Discovery.com is my guidebook for life. I learned how to plant an herb garden, train my dog, and cure my dandruff.
I learned that most meteors burn up in Earth's atmosphere. Ah! The atmosphere! Ah!
The atmosphere!
Every weeknight at 8, discover a series that takes you out of the ordinary and puts you on the inside. A series that gives you a different story every night, but always gives you the insider's view. So get access. Go behind the scenes and get the story from on the inside. Weeknights at 8 Eastern and Pacific, because nobody takes you there like the Discovery Channel.
Leopards are among the most solitary and secretive members of the cat family. As they did during the Ice Age, they use camouflage and speed to ambush their prey. This one decides to wait for a better opportunity. Leopards have adapted to a wider variety of habitats than any other wildcat. They spend much of their time in trees. Trees provide a good perch from which to search for prey or stage an ambush. And after a kill, trees make a good place to store prey out of the reach of scavengers. Adult males average about 130 pounds and can take down animals several times their own size. In a nearby patch of open savanna, a pack of African wild dogs huddles around their young. They bear some unusual traits for mammals that have endured almost unchanged since long before the Ice Age. Instead of the females raising the young, it is the male dogs that take the lead in child rearing. Accordingly, males in the pack outnumber the females by 2 to 1. Pups are born blind in their den and don't emerge until they're about 3 weeks old. Of course, fathers can't do everything, and this mom must endure the demands of a litter full of hungry pups. The mother decides that the pups have had enough, as she sees other duties calling. Through the ages, wild dogs have perfected the art of pack hunting and can bring down animals 5 times their size. They run at speeds up to 35 miles per hour, but like wolves, it is their team effort that makes them so successful. The pups are usually allowed to eat first. Wild dogs are exclusively meat eaters and have short, powerful jaws with an impressive array of shearing teeth. But they do not kill haphazardly. Each hunt preserves the balance of life on the African plains. Much as their ancestors have for millions of years, these adults have invested heavily in their pups. But as with all the animals that survived the Ice Age, their future remains uncertain. Today, 10,000 years after the Ice Age, the Earth's climate continues to warm. Animals that lived through the Ice Age now face a far tougher test in the struggle for depleted resources in space. And now it is man, rather than nature, that determines who will survive.
Every night, every corner of the world. Feathers to fangs, horns to hoofs. Travel the globe and hang out with the locals on Wild Discovery. Weeknights at 7, Saturdays at 8. But next, go behind closed doors and get the insider's view with extraordinary stories in places few have seen. Explore your world from a whole new perspective. Right now, you're going on the inside, and nobody takes you there like the Discovery Channel. Explore.
Maternity Ward, Sunday at 8 on TLC.
Human weakness.
Humankind.
Human justice.
Human behavior.
Human loss.
Human emotion.
Human luck.
Human question.
Are you human?
On the southern tip of Africa is the Klashis River mouth. It's honeycombed with caves, ancient cave shelters. The question is, were humans living here 100,000 years ago? A fossil from one cave suggested an answer. A bit of skull just above the eyes. But there's no brow ridge, a distinctive mark of the oldest hominids. And then this, a jawbone with a clearly defined chin, something only humans have. But was this human? If so, it would be a shock. 100,000-year-old Homo sapiens this far down in Africa. An idea that would turn the study of human origins upside down. Klashis Rivermouth finds made no sense. They seemed to be the wrong bones in the wrong place at the wrong time.
The absence of brow ridges and the presence of a chin, these are modern attributes, and this would indicate that we're dealing here with modern people and not with archaic people.
It was always assumed our species evolved in Europe. This is largely because the oldest modern human remains ever discovered were found in French caves 150 years ago. But if what was found at Klashis Rivermouth held true, paleontology was in for a surprise. To modern researchers, the bones from Klashis were like us, yet they seemed too old, and everyone knew. 100,000 years ago, there weren't modern humans in southern Africa. Our species evolved thousands of miles away, they said, in what is now France. But anthropologist Chris Stringer wasn't convinced. He set off on a marathon tour around the fossil archives of Europe to judge the bones for himself, to reconsider what the common wisdom was. This is the newest wave of archaeology, taking place not in the field, but in museum archives and storerooms. Stringer planned to make the first detailed comparison between the bones of an older species of hominid, the Neanderthals, and early modern humans. Humans were thought to have evolved from Neanderthals, but would the bones bear this out?
Right from the beginning, the Neanderthal fossils that I looked at in Europe seemed to be showing a consistent pattern. They had a double arch brow ridge at the front. They were long and low. They had had almost a spherical shape when viewed from behind. There were also features in the lower jaw and in the rest of the skeleton that seemed to mark them off from the modern human fossils that I was looking at. And if anything, the Neanderthals through time seem to be getting more different from the early modern humans rather than more like them, which was not, of course, what one would expect if they were their ancestors.
Across Europe, in museum after museum, Stringer could find no firm evidence to show how our species might have evolved from the Neanderthals. By the time he arrived in Paris at the end of his trip, he was beginning to think that an answer might never be found.
When I got here to Paris, I'd seen and measured a lot of fossils, and I already had a pretty clear idea of their features. But one of the biggest surprises for me here was a fossil from Africa, from Morocco, from a site called Jebel Ihud. And this fossil had been called an African Neanderthal. But as soon as I saw it, I realized that it was not like any Neanderthal I'd seen so far. In particular, the face was flat, the nose was relatively small, the cheekbones were much more like those of a modern human, and so it seemed, at least in the face, to be a better ancestor potentially for modern humans than any of the Neanderthals were. And although no one took Africa seriously as a place of origin, the place of origin for modern humans, this fossil, as I analysed and worked on it in similar material, began to suggest that Africa might indeed be the homeland of modern humans.
The Clashes Rivermouth people had accomplished something no apes had been able to do. They had integrated tool use, intelligence, and communication. It was a triumph of human achievement. But here was something new. Every culture has its shining moment. Here, it may have been when they first considered harvesting the sea. It was on these shores that such a moment happened. Among these rocks, we made one of those little leaps that are part of the ascent of man. Here, far earlier than ever before thought possible, we seem to have become observant and reflective. Still, the idea that humans might have first appeared in Africa was difficult to prove. A first step was to date the objects found alongside the human remains. But finding the precise age of the remains at Clashes called for a clever, high-tech way of dating.
Some of the earliest information we had on dating, fixing the time period when occupation began in this cave, came from a humble shell. And this is the operculum, the trapdoor of a turban shell.
Shells contain chemical traces that can reveal how hot or cold the sea was when they first formed. When tests were carried out on the shells from Clashes, the results were staggering.
These came from waters that were as warm as the present, and you get warm waters in the oceans between the ice ages. So this came from the last in-between ice age, in other words, an interglacial period. And that last interglacial period was 120,000 years ago.
Other dating techniques have supported these findings.
And we now have reasonably firmly established that these deposits are in the range between 120 and where they're working 90,000 years old. And it's from the level that they're working where human remains have come. And so we know we can bracket those human remains in a very definite time range.
At 90,000 years old, the Klashis fossils are at least 50,000 years older than any human remains found in Europe or elsewhere. Scientists found more evidence, not in ancient caves, but in our blood. Genetic research has transformed the study of human origins. Taking blood samples from communities across the world, scientists looked for variations in the genes of people living in Africa, Europe, and Asia. These tiny variants in our genetic makeup take thousands of generations to develop.
We found 199 variants in Africa, we found 98 in Europe, and we found 73 in Asia. So we're seeing a lot more diversity in Africa. And what this suggests is that the Asian and the European populations simply haven't had enough time to accumulate diversity, whereas the African populations have had a lot more time, suggesting that they're an ancestral population. The main conclusion of this work is that all individuals from around the world, whether they be African or of non-African descent, derive from a single common ancestral population that existed in Africa probably around 150,000 years ago.
Everyone alive today, east or west, black or white, is descended from the same small group of early humans who lived in Africa so long ago. For the Klashis Rivermouth people, this was the edge of their world, but not for long. We can only speculate on the exact reasons for any human migration, but in general, these reasons have remained constant. Overpopulation, climate change, environmental degradation, hostile neighbors. Few people pull up stakes voluntarily. Humans were here 100,000 years ago. But the Klashis Rivermouth people must have heard something that beckoned them forward. Out of Africa.
Dawn of Man is sponsored in part by the new Lincoln LS. Lincoln, American luxury.
Tools and your toys, all in one carry-on. The new BioSR.
Five-star meals from world-renowned chef Michelle Roux. Celebrity, the one cruise that puts dining in a whole new light. Celebrity Cruises. See life on a different level.
TLC takes you into the maternity ward.
Here, we see everything. You name it.
Quick, Mom! This is a child delivering a child.
Let's go, let's go, let's go! Come on!
You have to make fast decisions.
decisions. You're not only dealing with one life, you're dealing with two lives. Okay, no.
Young residents learn to be coaches and counselors. Complications take an emotional toll.
I realize that everyone's vulnerable.
But when a baby is born...
It's such a great feeling.
Maternity Ward, Sunday at 8 on TLC.
Time is running out on the blockbuster event of the summer. Any minute now, someone will become a Roadrunner high-speed online millionth customer. If you're the millionth Roadrunner customer installed in this community, your first year of service will be free. You'll receive a $10,000 check to contribute to charity and an all-expense-paid trip to a gala celebration in San Francisco. Call now, before it's too late.
Order now and get a 30-day money-back guarantee. Call Time Warner at 1-877-TWC-FAST.
Imagine a taste of Key West less than an hour away. A place where you can relax by the pool or blast off across the river. Soak up some island spirit at the sandbar overlooking the beautiful Indian River and enjoy a wonderful dinner with someone special and then dance the night away. Or do nothing at all. It's all waiting for you at the Key West Inn at Captain Hiram's in Sebastian, a traveler's paradise where you can escape to unwind and have fun. Take a tour of Captain Hiram's Key West Inn online at hirams.com.
The study of human evolution is always a minefield. And when archaeologists gathered in New York in 1999 to hear Chris Stringer present the theory that our species first evolved in Africa, tension filled the air.
There had to be tremendous security. The fossils had to be escorted in a convoy from the airport. There also had to be special exhibition cases which were bulletproof and even bomb-proof against attacks by terrorists or creationists.
The meeting was called to discuss one of the foremost questions scientists have ever faced. Where and when did our species first walk the Earth?
No one doubted that our ancient ancestors had lived there, but certainly the view that Africa could have been the single place of origin of our species was a long way from being demonstrated convincingly.
While the genetic data supported Stringer's theory that our species was African in origin, others began to question whether these first African ancestors were fully modern humans.
Many people were prepared to accept that the modern body form had evolved in Africa at quite an early date. But there was still this separate question of when modern human behavior, when the modern human mind, when language began. And certainly some people then challenged the idea that that had originated over a long period of time in Africa. Some people believe that it was a much more recent development, and therefore the modern anatomy actually evolved before modern human behavior.
On the same stretch of South Africa's coast, just 100 miles west of Clashes, scientists found another cave. They were about to discover something that would support Stringer's theory in a way related to human behavior, not just human anatomy. Led by Chris Henshelwood, who'd been exploring these caves for many years.
I first came to this area when I was about 5 years old. As a child, over the years I used to wander around these dunes and I was always fascinated by what I saw there. What looked like stone tools to me, lots of shells, perhaps old fireplaces and old bones. Years later I decided to do archaeology, and that's why I'm here today, because I think this area is very rich.
Henshelwood remembered a small cave that had fascinated him as a child. It's little more than a gap in the cliff face, but large enough to offer shelter from the wind and the rain. When he and his team dug into the cave floor, they found evidence of human occupation going back many thousands of years.
The top section of the cave over here dates to within the last 2,000 years. Whereas this yellow sand below it was deposited at a very, very much earlier date. Almost certainly this sand blew into the cave about 100,000 years ago. That means that all the layers below this are older than 100,000 years old.
It's a layer cake of culture, a detailed record of cave use from the present down to the period 100,000 years ago. These sediments are a text that can be read like a book. Every layer datable, every layer full of the remnants of daily living. The team removed tons of sand and debris, working down through the layers of the cave floor. Concealed in the rubble, at the 100,000-year level, workers found a hoard of ancient artifacts. For example, here was a range of stone tools made from an especially hard rock called silk red, a rock only found 20 miles away, expertly worked to produce razor-sharp, double-edged blades.
That tells me that there was a clear mental template. They knew what they wanted to create. They didn't wander around the landscape, picking up a piece of rock, banging it, and cutting an animal open. This is cognitive thought. This is advanced thought. You know what you want to make. You go to the source, you get the raw material, you bring it back, and you make it. And you make the same thing over and over again to exactly the same precision. I think that is very advanced behavior.
Some of the bone tools found at the site reveal even more about the lifestyle of these people.
This is an awl, a tool that was used for piercing leather. These are very important indeed, because they indicate to us that people 100,000 years ago were probably making clothing.
These tools are of a sophistication and a complexity that had only been found in Europe. Here in Africa was evidence of a people with the same kind of skills living 50,000 years earlier. These remarkable people had invented and adapted a wide range of tools that allowed them to exploit a very rich environment. Not the tools alone made the difference. Plenty of animals, birds, monkeys used tools. No, their tools were made with careful intent, selected from precise raw materials and applied to specific and difficult tasks. This was not tool use. This was technology.
Dawn of Man is sponsored in part by the new Sony Vaio SR.
Your tools and your toys, all in one carry-on. The new Vaio SR.
pediatricians are parents who care about gentleness as much as you do, which is why 8 out of 10 pediatricians choose the gentleness of Johnson's for their own babies. Only Johnson's head-to-toe baby wash has the No More Tears formula. It's milder than any baby soap and as gentle to eyes as pure water. Johnson's head-to-toe baby wash. Not just gentle. Johnson's gentle.
November 23, 1998. To settle state lawsuits, America's major tobacco companies signed a tobacco settlement agreement that provides the states over $200 billion and restricts the marketing of tobacco products. The agreement bans all tobacco company billboards and transit advertising. No more tobacco logos on clothing or merchandise. No paid tobacco product placement in movies. And no more cartoon characters selling cigarettes. The agreement strictly prohibits the marketing of tobacco to kids. It restricts tobacco brand sponsorship of team sports and entertainment events. And it provides $1.5 billion to fund youth anti-smoking ads in education. But don't take our word for it. For more information, call for a copy of the Tobacco Settlement Agreement. Because things are changing. And at Philip Morris, we wanted you to know.
Just moments old, fighting for life. Doctors provide critical cardiac care and hope. Join TLC for an evening of miraculous medicine. Children's Hospital of Orange County, next Monday at 9 on TLC.
Gandhi, Kennedy, King. Men who took on the world. Leaders who inspired a generation.
The whole country, I think, believes very much in John Kennedy.
David Crosby and TLC bring you history like you've never heard it before. From Vietnam to Tibet, Live Aid to Farm Aid. Hear the untold stories of artists and tragedies that inspired music's most powerful moments. Stand and Be Counted, a 2-night television event August 21st and 22nd at 9 on TLC.
Hello, Meteor.
Hello, Meteor.
Have you heard about the website called Discovery.com?
Discovery.com is my guidebook for life. I learned how to plant an herb garden, train my dog, and cure my dandruff.
I learned that most meteors burn up in Earth's atmosphere. Ah! The atmosphere!
Ah! The atmosphere! Ah!
In this South African coastal cave near Blombos, Chris Henshelwood found what is possibly the most important clue. And it was a total surprise.
People in early periods generally in the world do not collect shellfish. I think perhaps what it is that they don't realize that shellfish are food. I think you need to have the ability, the brain power, if you want to call it, the cognitive ability to be able to say, there's shellfish down there, we can collect them, we can cook them, and we can eat them.
Collecting shellfish marks a dramatic change in behavior. It means that people were thinking about their world in a new way.
So I think what you're seeing here is the kind of behavior where people are able to look at their whole environment and exploit a wide range of foodstuffs.
These species of shellfish are all quite common on the rocks today and are species that were collected and eaten in quantity by the people who lived in the caves. The shellfish are interesting not only because they were a mainstay of diet for coastal people, but also because we think that they were used as bait for catching other marine animals. And we're particularly interested in catching of fish at Blombos Cave because this site is giving us the first good evidence that people 100,000 years ago were capable of catching fish, indeed that they could recognize fish as potential food sources.
Evidence of fishing came with the discovery of large fish bones in the lower layers of the cave.
Fishing is interesting because it's one of those activities that requires cooperation between people in a group. don't just go down to the rocks and go and fish. You also need to have some kind of template in your mind as to how you're going to go down there, what kind of equipment you're going to need, how you're going to lure the fish in, how you're going to work as a couple of people together to catch that fish.
We think that they were catching them, perhaps by throwing bait into the water, and in a deep gully like this, fairly large fish would very likely take that bait and then be available for people to spear or otherwise try to gaff out of the water.
Fishing depends on more than just an ability to survive.
It tells us that these people were able to think ahead, to plan ahead, to get an activity together which involved the cooperation of a number of people in that group, and then carry it off. And they carry it off, we know they carry it off because the traces of the fish are in the deposit over here.
Essence of modern, mature thinking. It's called deferred gratification. Give someone a fish and they have a meal. Teach them to fish and they eat for life. And so does their tribe. Along the coast at Clashies, Hilary Deacon was also looking for evidence of modern human behavior.
Now we're coming up to the top levels of the site, and very nicely exposed here are a series of hearths. Hearths like this occur right the way through the deposit, but they're particularly clear here.
The ash layers of ancient hearths, fires made again and again in the same place, have built up in the cave.
This is the kind of thing that was being done 100,000 years ago. It was done 5,000 years ago, and it's still being done in the present in certain parts of Africa.
The ash layers show a continuity between the life lived here more recently and the original behavior of the first modern humans 100,000 years ago. But the caves also contain other clues to the lives of these early people. Embedded in the rock, Hilary Deacon has found traces of a substance loaded with significance.
Red ochre clays which have been stained by iron oxide, and they have this brilliant red color. In modern day Africa, in very many places, you have color coding for different parts of life. Red particularly symbolizes living. It symbolizes blood, and this is used in the present as coloring material for people who are going through initiation.
Red ochre is still used today in initiation ceremonies and other rituals at Griquatin, a small community not far away on South Africa's northern Cape. As the entire tribe celebrates outside, a group of older women carry out an ancient ceremony marking a young girl's transition to adult life. red paste made from ochre. It's a moving ceremony and an example of symbolic behavior, something only humans seem to do. When Henshelwood began looking for red ochre in his cave, no trace of it could be found. Then he thought some more about this rare prestige item.
The people regarded the ochre as being so important that they stored it very carefully. When I excavated these layers, I could put my hand in here and I could take out pieces of ochre that had been stored here for over 100,000 years. I think that shows how important ochre was to these people.
This was ochre that had indeed been ritually used.
If you have a look at this piece fairly carefully, you can see there are striations over here. This is where they've taken this piece and they've grated it on a rock. In fact, on this very rock, somebody sat here 100,000 years ago and they rubbed it around to make a fine powder. We have some traces of the powder left here. They're very faint now, but we have tested the powder and it definitely is ochre. We think that people in this cave used it to decorate themselves with and also to decorate bone tools and stone artifacts. In fact, we found evidence of some of the tools and artifacts here with the ochre staining still on it. This bone artifact was used probably as a gouge of some sort. What I think is very unusual about it, most unusual about it, is that it's left the imprint of the maker's hand on the tool on both sides. The maker or the person who was using the artifact had ochre staining on their hands. And here you can very clearly see where this part of the hand has been transferred onto the artifact over here. And if I turn it over, you'll see where my thumb was before. It's left a perfect thumbprint over here in ochre as well.
The cave people valued ochre. They used it to decorate their possessions and their bodies. But did they really have the ability to think like us? There was one more bit of evidence in the cave. On one piece of red ochre was a series of tiny marks.
They've taken a stone point and they've cut lines in one direction and then cut similar lines in the opposite direction, creating a diamond mesh pattern. Deliberately. That's the important point. Deliberately. This is not accidental. And I think they've been trying to create something that's symbolic here. Perhaps we have the earliest evidence of an attempt at creating something you could call art.
It is impossible to overestimate the arrival of art and decoration as a measure of humanity. It means we had observed the world around us. We had noticed there were disturbing or wonderful or unknowable things about it, and were prepared to take steps to deal with it. Replicating the world in art was a way of colonizing the world. To paint it, you have to see it. The people who lived along the African coast 100,000 years ago were far more sophisticated than earlier members of the human family. They fished, they cooked their food on hearths, they decorated themselves and their artifacts. They thought in a symbolic way. They were fully modern humans. They were us. lifestyle had been a long time coming, but its distinguishing characteristics are clear. It's dominated by the long childhood, an extended period before we're self-sufficient. Mainly, the long childhood is a time of learning from experience, but it's also a time when the young are exposed to the wisdom of their elders and the accumulated wisdom called culture of all their people. The Book of Nature and the Book of Culture contain everything a body needs to survive.
Dawn of Man is sponsored in part by Sun Microsystems. We're the dot in .com.
In a race to future markets.
Initiate startup.
Dawson, prepare to launch.
It's gonna be a wild ride!
Wow. Where technology means everything.
They're coming!
Oh. And you either have the power.
The server should have crashed by now.
Or you don't.
Dawson, how many more hits can this dot take?
Captain, power's what the dot's all about.
Beyond the limits.
The power of Sun technology is highly logical. I like it.
Your Enterprise will like it too.
Reactor 3 at critical mass. Core temperature still rising.
Close the flow channels. Activate the hydrogen recombiners.
Meltdown.
Do it.
In 10 seconds.
Are you new to the team?
Well, actually, I'm with the tour group. But I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
Stay smart. Stay at a Holiday Inn Express.
Contenders, 3 continents, 1 winner, Lincoln LS. Motor Trend Car of the Year.
C'est une infamie.
C'est fantastique.
C'est horrible.
Tiens, papa.
Human. Are you human? Coming up next on TLC, humans and Neanderthals live side by side fighting to survive. The difference between success and extinction is something very unexpected. Dawn of Man continues next on TLC.
Of all the journeys you'll take in life, this is the ultimate. A raging water coaster ride into the world's deepest mystery. Enter the realm of SeaWorld's newest adventure. Journey to Atlantis. Experience a whole new world right here at SeaWorld.
Join the hundreds of people rushing to Rockledge for Chandler's Furniture's phenomenal going out of business sale. Yes, after more than a decade, Chandler's Furniture is closing the doors forever. Every stick of fine furniture, bedding, and handmade oriental rugs must be sold immediately. All showroom and warehouse stock must be completely liquidated at unbelievable going out of business prices. But you must hurry. The huge inventory is being reduced daily. There'll never be a better selection than now. Chandler's Furniture Rockledge going out of business forever sale. Join the crowd while there's still time and furniture left. Everything goes at a sacrifice.
Researchers today are looking into the genetic variations between living human populations for another key to our distant origins.
By comparing the genetic diversity outside of Africa to what we're observing inside of Africa, we've been able to estimate that early in the history of modern humans in Africa, there was subdivision amongst African populations. At some time after that, around 100,000 years ago, there was a migration of a small group, a subset of the African populations migrated out of Africa, spreading across the rest of the globe.
In time, Descendants of the Clashes Rivermouth people moved out of Africa and on to the rest of the world. Archaeologists recently discovered modern human remains in Australia, dating to 60,000 years ago, much earlier than anyone had previously thought. But why? Why had our ancestors moved so fast and so far from the place where they evolved? What was driving them on?
In prehistory, we know that most people were hunter-gatherers, foragers. And a hunting and gathering lifestyle is a pretty good lifestyle, but it's not one that you can absolutely count on. However, in caves like Classes Rivermouth and Blombos, we find the use of coastal resources, and moving to coastal resources provides a new potential. You have more dependable food, and you have food in larger quantities, and your population can grow. But once it has grown, you're actually harvesting intensively those resources, and the shellfish do respond. They become rare, up to the point that they can disappear completely from beaches. So what you have is that population that was first allowed to grow now needs to move on in order to support itself. They cannot move back because there's more people behind. So they have to move forward and along the coast. At some time, between 100 and 60,000 years ago, people occupied all this coastline and extended and dispersed down to Southeast Asia and eventually crossed Australia.
To our coast-hugging ancestors, life was a beach, a very long one. Generation by generation, they moved east along it. Migration would have allowed our ancestors to keep moving through a consistent, recognizable world, one that they knew very well. They were thus armed with a wellspring of experience which allowed them to build on their past.
The interesting thing about the coastal route is that you've got a narrow coastal zone, and if people were adapted to that, then almost they were pre-adapted to go all the way from Africa through southern Asia, all the way towards Australia, more or less staying in one zone, which they were already used to. It does seem astonishing to us that they could have travelled so far, but we have to remember that they weren't exploring for knowledge or gold or glory. They were doing it to survive. And of course, 10 or 20,000 miles seems an enormous distance to us, but they only had to expand their territories by 1 mile every year, and in 10,000 years they'd gone 10,000 miles.
On this great journey, our species began to acquire vital new skills. A pattern of building on past successes began to be the human way.
By the time you have the first modern humans, they all have the potential of invention that we have. And I think that's actually what makes them modern. They can invent solutions to new problems. So once exposed to these coastal areas, and once they actually manage to control these resources, from there to a boat, from there to a bigger boat, from there to nets, from there to harpoons, it's on their step.
gradual progression of ideas is the start of the ascent of man. It's as clear and obvious as a walk on the beach. From here, you can see as far as Cape Canaveral.
Retired gangsters.
You ever live here?
Define live. Being out of the life.
Special orders do upset us.
Was killing them.
I want you to whack somebody.
Nobody's gonna whack nobody.
There's nothing like a little action.
Let's get lucky.
To make them feel young again.
Okay, honey, I'm all ready for you. You all ready for me?
The Crew, rated PG-13, starts Friday, August 25th at a theater near you.
Listen to me. We have absolutely nothing to fear.
We're never going to survive this, none of us.
Something so powerful.
There's something wrong here.
Something so advanced that it knows no boundaries.
We've got to upgrade the server. It's our only chance.
Sun Microsystems presents The Dot. Your competition will never know what hit them.
Beneath their long white coats, most pediatricians are parents who care about gentleness as much as you do. Which is why 8 out of 10 pediatricians choose the gentleness of Johnson's for their own babies. Only Johnson's head-to-toe baby wash has the No More Tears formula. It's milder than any baby soap and as gentle to eyes as pure water. Johnson's head-to-toe baby wash. Not just gentle. Johnson's gentle.
Coming up next on TLC, humans and Neanderthals live side by side fighting to survive. The difference between success and extinction is something very unexpected. Dawn of Man continues next on TLC.
In a world of suffering, music can make a difference.
You can reach anyone through music.
Stand and Be Counted, a 2-night television event August 21st and 22nd at 9 on TLC.
Hello, fellow partially eaten fish.
Hello there.
Have you heard about the website called Discovery.com?
Why, yes. It has interesting facts about the world we live in and lots of practical information on stuff like health, traveling, and pets.
Wow.
They even have the news and weather.
No cage, no special gear, nowhere to hide. Shark Week Uncaged. Join host Nigel Marvin for nightly Uncaged Shark Adventures.
Fantastic.
Featuring world premiere programs and hot new technology to see sharks in 3D. Shark Week as you've never seen it before. Shark Week Uncaged. Premiering Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern and Pacific on the Discovery Channel.
Early man, inventive and resourceful as he was, discovered a number of ways out of Africa. In fact, it would have been strange if he'd used only one path, the coastal one. In the northern part of the continent are traces of an inland track out. This is a sort of pre-industrial site, a stone field, where rocks were once tumbled and rounded by an ancient river. It was here that early man came to select just the right stones to be shaped into tools for killing and cutting and scraping. These were the raw materials that allowed life to flourish.
This place
place was used as a quarry. People came here to make stone tools, and the hillside's littered with stone tools. I've just found one.
It'd be thousands of years before man learned to mine for rocks. Until then, life would center around sites like this.
And a few years ago, some Belgian archaeologists very unexpectedly found a human skeleton in this pit.
The skeleton was dated at 60,000 years old.
So there were modern human people here making these stone tools, quarrying them, then taking them away at least 60,000 years ago.
The significance of this quarry field is its proximity to another natural route out of Africa, the River Nile. This river valley marks the course of what scientists believe was a second and later wave of migration.
The Nile Valley was like a permanent oasis running for thousands of miles. Humans would have been here in the Stone Age, living on the banks of the river, and following the river in a northerly direction would have led them right up into northeast Africa and into the Middle East.
In time, these migrants also moved on, around the Mediterranean Sea, further north into Europe, gradually populating the world with our own species. We don't yet know how many of us there were at the very beginning. It's difficult to calculate the size of the first populations. But however many of us, or however few there were, places like Clashes are where the very first of our kind emerged. These beaches were home.
Our species has come a long way in a short time, and what unites us in terms of our biology and our shared history is very important. We shouldn't forget that. And despite the differences we have around the world now, those have grown up very recently. And I think what we share in common should be as important or more important than the things which divide us.
The study of human origins seems mainly to do with differences, but in the deepest sense, it's about our far more numerous common bonds. Human evolution, like all evolution, is about the projection and survival of our genes. The genes that constitute Homo sapiens had got this far via two mechanisms: Darwin's survival of the fittest, and by mating selection. It was a gradual process that extended back into the deep past. But we were about to face a new and profound test. When we first emerged, there were several competing versions of hominid about. Life for Homo sapiens might have somewhat resembled a single elimination tournament. The question was, who would be the last left standing? In the next program, the final chapter of our story, we will witness the meeting between us and the other species who had lived undisturbed until we arrived. Would it be Eden or Armageddon?
This has been a presentation of TLC and the BBC, world-class television.
If you like this TLC show, you can own it on video. Call this number and get your own high-quality VHS tape of the episode you just watched for only $19.95 plus shipping and handling. Satisfaction guaranteed from TLC Home Video. Call now to order.
Coming up next on TLC, humans and Neanderthals live side by side fighting to survive. The difference between success and extinction is something very unexpected. Dawn of Man continues next on TLC.
Human drama.
Creativity. Are you human?
This is the end. Or so it must have seemed to the Neanderthal people who were driven here to the back of beyond, now the Atlantic coast of Portugal. But who could have pushed them to the edge? Could it have been us, Homo sapiens? Known that modern humans faced competition from other hominids. But what was the exact nature of that contest?
The first thing we found were the two bones of the forearm, these two here. Based on the length of the bones, we knew immediately that it was a fairly young child.
Was this child a member of the old order, the Neanderthals, or one of the bold and aggressive newcomers, the human beings?
This is where we found the skeleton, right here at this level. At the time we started digging it, all we knew is that it was older than 20,000 years ago. And that's because 20,000 years ago was the age of the deposits up here.
Before we arrived, other kinds of hominids were already in Europe. So who was this skeleton anyway?
We really did not know how much older than 20,000. Could have been 25, 30,000, even 50,000. So at first, we were not sure what species of human we were dealing with in this case.
Could the bones be one of our ancestors, or something that science had never even considered before? Part of the answer, it seems, can be found in the caves of southwest France, where early man once lived.
We're pretty sure that modern humans evolved in southern Africa around 150,000 years ago, moved out of Africa around 50,000 years ago, and began to colonize the northern latitudes, and they colonized all of Europe about 35,000 years ago, including France, where we are now.
What happened when modern humans arrived here is the final mystery in the story of human evolution. Archaeologists Jean-Philippe Rigaud and Jan Schimek believe that they are close to the answer. In this cave, they found the drama they were looking for.
This is the level at which we find the first evidence for modern humans in this cave. That evidence consists of a new suite of artifacts. Artifacts that include things like this stone tool made on a blade, artifacts made of new materials like bone and antler, and completely new artifacts that we've not seen before, like this pierced deer canine. Artifacts used as objects of personal adornment.
modern human level, further back in time, other evidence was found. Homo sapiens were not the first people in this cave.
Before modern humans arrived in this cave, other people lived here too. People that were actually quite different than us, people we call Neanderthals.
Neanderthals were the original Europeans. The skeleton kept here is the first Neanderthal known to science. Neanderthals had what scientists call a robust build. They were heavy-boned, they were short, and immensely strong. Physically, quite unlike anyone living today.
Neanderthal skulls are very distinctive. They have double-arched brow ridges, a low forehead, a long, wide but low brain case. You can see the differences on me.
Before we arrived in Europe, the Neanderthals were the masters of this universe.
Neanderthals were present in this area for a very, very long period of time. These levels date to about 70,000 years ago, but we have evidence of their presence that goes back over 200,000 years.
In its lower levels, the cave is loaded with Neanderthal evidence. A great many stone tools and hand axes. And then, quite suddenly, there's a troubling gap.
The Neanderthal evidence stops here, the point at which modern humans first appear. And after that point, there's no more evidence for Neanderthals.
Why does the evidence for Neanderthals disappear just when the modern humans arrive? The implications are dark. In Portugal, there were signs that the bones of the child might belong to exactly this nasty period in prehistory. Archaeologists calculated the child must have been about 4 years old when it died. But they noticed that for a young modern human, its bones were exceptionally strong and robust.
The overall robusticity and strength of the bones, like for instance the humerus here, suggested to us that it might have been an earlier fossil species of human.
This is a typical upper arm bone of Neanderthal, and this is the upper arm bone of a modern human. We clearly can see that the Neanderthal arm bone is much thicker and stronger than the modern human's arm bone.
Even though the bones seemed to be Neanderthal, the question remained, who were they, and what was our relationship to them? Nagging questions that have been hanging around ever since the first Neanderthal fossil was found 150 years ago.
In the earlier part of this century, Neanderthals were generally seen as club-wielding ape-men, in some ways more animal than human, with hairy skins, distinctly unintelligent.
Neanderthals were thought to be primitive half-humans who eventually evolved into us. The trouble was, when science discovered our ancestors had emerged independently in Africa, an entirely new snapshot of human evolution was about to develop.
Dawn of Man. is sponsored in part by Lincoln, American luxury.
Lincoln LS, Motor Trend Car of the Year.
Your tools and your toys, all in one carry-on. The new Bio-SR.
Beneath their long white coats, most pediatricians are parents who care about gentleness as much as you do. Which is why 8 out of 10 pediatricians choose the gentleness of Johnson's for their own babies. Only Johnson's head-to-toe baby wash has the No More Tears formula. It's milder than any baby soap and as gentle to eyes as pure water. Johnson's head-to-toe baby wash. Not just gentle. Johnson's gentle.
TLC takes you into the maternity ward.
Here, we see everything. You name it.
Let's go, let's go, let's go!
You have to make fast decisions.
You're not only dealing with one life, you're dealing with 2 lives.
Push, Mom! Maternity Ward, Sunday at 8 on TLC.
In a world of suffering, music can make a difference.
You can reach anyone through music.
Stand and Be Counted, a 2-night television event August 21st and 22nd at 9 on TLC.
John Edward is a man with a singular gift. He communicates with the dead and reunites them with the living.
They may or may not come through with something that you're expecting to hear. I will tell you what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm feeling. Whatever I see, hear, or feel, I share with you. I don't hold anything back. Okay, I'm ready to begin.
What you're about to see is true. Witness the phenomenon. Crossing Over with John Edward. Part of the summer of sci-fi.
The fact that I'm responsible for the upbringing of another human being is utterly ridiculous. How did this happen? Suddenly, I'm the one saying, don't touch the cookie on the ground. And I'm really thinking, 5-second rule. That cookie just hit the ground. That cookie is still good.
The Imported Car Store on US 1 in Melbourne.
Is turning forensic science upside down. In the same way, it's also transforming archaeology.
What we wanted to investigate with the Neanderthal was how the Neanderthals were related to modern humans. And we wanted to attempt to retrieve DNA from these fossils, because by doing so, we could then potentially study real defined genetic differences or similarities between the Neanderthals and modern humans, rather than studying genetics very indirectly by the shapes and forms of bones and so on.
That's where we took the sample from. I really hated it. It was like cutting into the Mona Lisa, but it was very important to get this information about the DNA sequence.
The shock was that Neanderthal DNA was substantially different from the DNA of modern humans.
So from these DNA sequences, we don't see sequences that are similar to the Neanderthal sequence in us today. And particularly, we don't see it in Europe, for example, where the Neanderthals existed until 30,000 years ago.
Far from being primitive versions of us, they were a separate and parallel species. They were very much alive when our true ancestors, the first modern humans, emerged from Africa and entered the land of the Neanderthals. In Portugal, Neanderthals survived until 28,000 years ago, long after modern humans entered Europe. So for a time, the two species of human must have shared the landscape. The Portuguese bones first seemed to have thick Neanderthal-like features. But then archaeologists discovered a different part of the body.
We found the jawbone, and the jawbone, which you can see here, had a very prominent chin. Other species of human that existed before moderns did not have this characteristic developed chin.
It seemed they'd found an early modern human after all. The fact that Neanderthals and modern humans were different species from different places shattered many old beliefs.
In the old reconstructions, modern humans are often portrayed as pale-skinned people, whereas the Neanderthals are often portrayed not only as hairy, but having rather dark skins. When in reality, the fact that they'd been living in these European environments almost certainly meant that they had paler skins, whereas the modern humans who were coming out of Africa were not only less well adapted biologically to survive in these cold environments, because they'd evolved in the tropical environments of Africa, but presumably also had dark skins.
It now seems that modern humans, our ancestors, were actually less well equipped for life in Europe than the Neanderthals.
Neanderthals were superbly adapted to surviving in Europe. They were short, stocky, short-limbed, and that's the best way of conserving heat and surviving in cold conditions. The remarkable thing is that even though the Neanderthals were superbly adapted, they became extinct, and the modern humans who were not so well adapted to these environments survived.
Evidence of Neanderthal culture lies just below the human level.
We found evidence of the presence of Neanderthals scattered all through this cave. They made fireplaces, like the one you see here, and they also produced a number of tools, like this hand axe, worked out of flint. And what we call a side scraper. Both of these are pretty typical Neanderthal tools.
There are tools for hunting, butchering, and skinning game, tools for cutting wood and scraping hides. These finely crafted implements testify to the Neanderthals' abilities, but they also highlight a fundamental weakness.
From an archaeological viewpoint, the most remarkable thing about Neanderthal technology is the way it hardly changes significantly over about 250,000 years. You get essentially the same shapes of tools made by the same techniques over this whole period. Now, as soon as you get modern humans on the scene, you get a whole range of dramatic changes. They suddenly start producing new shapes of stone tools, obviously designed for different functions. And they start producing tools from bone, antler, and ivory, which had never been used before.
Homo sapiens had the same needs for food and shelter as the Neanderthals, but their tools show them inventing new and varied ways of meeting those needs. Ingenuity is the key to our success.
Clearly, the modern humans had something in terms of certainly adaptation and behavior, but I believe also something in terms of mental capacities that the Neanderthals lacked.
Samples of soil, shifts in the lay of the land, and fossil remains of plants and animals all suggest a sudden and dramatic change in prehistoric Europe. 35,000 years ago, climate and temperatures alike began to plummet. Everyone faced the supreme test of their ability to adapt.
One thing is absolutely certain. The climatic changes that the world underwent at that time were so large that practically no part of the world and nothing that lived in it escaped its consequences.
Cold weather transformed the landscape. On the uplands, forests died and gave way to barren moors. But the valleys were more sheltered.
Down in the valley there were trees still, little forests, not very large, and also associated with these forests the sort of wildlife that you expect there, wild boar and similar forest animals.
The Neanderthals followed their traditional game animals into those valleys. Bad move. Instead of adapting to the new, wide world, they retreated to where things were safe and familiar.
They withdrew more and more of the time into the valleys and spent less and less out in the highlands around.
And without realizing it, the Neanderthals had guaranteed their own destruction.
Dawn of Man is sponsored in part by the new Sony Vaio SR.
Your tools and your toys, all in one carry-on. The new Vaio SR.
November 23, 1998. To settle state lawsuits, America's major tobacco companies signed a tobacco settlement agreement that provides the states over $200 billion and restricts the marketing of tobacco products. The agreement bans all tobacco company billboards and transit advertising. No more tobacco logos on clothing or merchandise. No paid tobacco product placement in movies. And no more cartoon characters selling cigarettes. The agreement strictly prohibits the marketing of tobacco to kids. It restricts tobacco brand sponsorship of team sports and entertainment events. And it provides $1.5 billion to fund youth anti-smoking ads and education. But don't take our word for it. For more information, call for a copy of the Tobacco Settlement Agreement. Because things are changing. And at Philip Morris, we wanted you to know.
Contenders, 3 continents, 1 winner, Lincoln LS. Motor Trend Car of the Year.
Put wings on an ordinary pad, and it's still an ordinary pad. Put wings on Stay Free's 4-wall maxi, and you've got superior protection.
Only Stay Free has 4-wall protection and wings.
Superior protection against leaks.
TLC takes you into the maternity ward.
Here, we see everything, you name it.
Let's go, let's go, let's go!
You have to make fast decisions.
You're not only dealing with one life, you're dealing with 2 lives.
Push, Mom!
Maternity ward, Sunday at 8 on TLC.
Musicians.
Is everybody satisfied with the way we've been ending it?
Social change. What has one got to do with the other? Find out when David Crosby and TLC bring you a never-before-seen look at the artists and events that have inspired some of music's most powerful moments.
People need it to make a difference.
It's an incredible television event taking you from the turbulent 60s to the 21st century. Making music, making history. Stand and be counted. A 2-night television event August 21st and 22nd at 9 on TLC.
Hello, fellow partially eaten fish.
Hello there.
Have you heard about the website called discovery.com?
Why, yes. It has interesting facts about the world we live in and lots of practical information on stuff like health, traveling, and pets.
Wow.
They even have the news and weather.
In Portugal, the newfound bones were about to speak again. It was clear now that they were indeed those of a young modern human, rather than a Neanderthal. The skeleton was remarkably complete, even though children's bones are extremely fragile. The bones could only have survived if the body had been handled with care after death. And this is what the next discovery suggested.
The whole skeleton was covered in red ochre, and this was particularly visible in the skull.
The use of the mineral red ochre in prehistory is associated with ceremonial burial, and only one creature is known to treat its dead with such respect.
This is a very typical ritual behavior in early modern human times in Europe.
As the archaeologists continued to search, they discovered something else, a tiny object of vast significance.
As we dug through the deposits, we found an ornament, a shell bead. And these kinds of ornaments are also associated with early modern human burials known elsewhere in Europe.
Ornaments are the defining mark of modern humans. Beads identical to the Portuguese find have also been discovered in the São Valley in France in Cave 16. They come from the levels where modern humans once lived. At the French field lab, Jean-Philippe Rigaud has studied these early products of human creativity. Despite the harsh climate, it now seems that modern humans were thriving and moving freely right across the European landscape.
This shell comes from the Atlantic coast, and it has been transported from the Atlantic to Cave 16. We have also some shells coming from the Mediterranean coast, which is quite a long distance from where we are now.
Modern humans even pushed into the freezing mountains of Europe.
This bead is made of steatite, and it comes from the Central Pyrenees. This is more than 200 kilometers.
Polished beads of stone and ivory, pierced seashells, pendants carved from the teeth of deer and foxes. All across the continent, modern humans left behind an extraordinary trail of finely crafted ornaments.
Now this is a whole new explosion in human technology. It appears with the first humans. These are the first body ornaments, the first interest in personal decoration in 5 million years of human evolution.
The child skeleton from Portugal had some modern human features, a pronounced chin, and it had been buried with care and wearing a seashell ornament. But archaeologists were still struck by the primitive Neanderthal-like thickness of its bones. Who was this mystery child? The skeleton was taken to Lisbon for a more conclusive examination. Bone samples from the skeleton were sent out for carbon dating. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, the child's body was looked at in minute detail. The results were startling.
When we started reassembling the skeleton in the lab, we noticed something odd about the mandible, because in modern humans, the angle between the chin and the gum line is quite wide. And in this child, the angle is not at all what we would expect. It is much narrower.
Although the child's chin was modern in shape, the angle of the jaw was primitive. And then came something even more remarkable. This time from the bones of the limbs.
If we compare the upper arm bone of the Neanderthal with my arm proportions, it's quite similar, but if we compare the lower arm proportions, you clearly can see that the Neanderthal lower arm is much shorter than mine.
We realized that there were a few odd things about the proportion of the limbs. That is, the lower leg bone was too short in proportion to the upper leg bone. The same pattern was visible in the arm. That is, the upper arm was proportionately longer than the lower arm.
These body proportions are typical of people who have evolved in cold northern climates. But Homo sapiens, recently out of Africa, had the long limbs of tropical people.
All these characteristics are characteristics of Neanderthals.
Although the child had Neanderthal features, analysis revealed that it had lived 3,000 years after the last known Neanderthal had died. There was one more revelation to come. A hoard of Neanderthal artifacts that could once again change our view of prehistoric Europe. Sometimes it's not what you don't know that hurts you, it's what you know that isn't so. In southern France, scientists began to reconsider the real differences between Neanderthals and modern humans. Long ago, a hoard of ornaments was dug up from caves at Arcy-sur-Cure. For 50 years, they had been thought the work of Homo sapiens. But then a tiny fragment of human bone found within the ornaments was reevaluated. Anatomist Fred Spoor has developed new techniques for identifying early humans. Using medical CT scans, he can now look deep inside fossil bones.
This is the human fossil from Arcy-sur-Cure. As you can see, it's a really small fragment. We think it's from a one-year-old child. And it's actually a part of the skull here on the sides, the part that contains the ear. You can actually see the little ear hole around here. Now this piece of bone also contains your organ of hearing and your organ of balance. And today we know that there's a difference in the shape of the organ of balance in different types of humans.
Because the bone had been found among a rich collection of ornaments, it seemed to be modern human. But all that was about to change. When Fred Spoor scanned the bone, its inner ear became clearly visible. His diagnosis was instant.
It was very clear from the outcome immediately that there was no question that this was a Neanderthal.
The link between Neanderthals and ornaments was astonishing to João Ziliau. If true, it would mean that Neanderthals were much more like us than had ever been thought possible. Just who had really made these ornaments could only be revealed by examining the collection in detail. The ornaments appeared to resemble those found at modern human sites, except for some small but distinct differences.
The first thing that struck me were these little grooves carved around the base of the teeth. And this is something that you never see in collections of ornaments made by early modern humans.
Clearly ornaments. These were not pierced like the beads made by modern humans. They were not threaded onto their strings, but tied. No ornaments like these had ever been found before, and they were found lying among the bones of Neanderthals.
There were so many of them. They were so beautifully made. They were so varied, and they were more than 30,000 years old. So they had to be the oldest, or among the oldest ornaments in the world. Neanderthals must have been the authors of these ornaments. There is no other possible explanation for the facts.
The find called into question yet another certainty of prehistory. It was said Neanderthals weren't clever enough to ornament anything. They lived in the moment, their lives governed by practical demands, satisfied by utilitarian responses. They had no need for art. But that was wrong. Now it seems the Neanderthals were about to take on board this essentially human activity, if even in a tentative, imitative way. But would this art be enough to save them? Right here in these French caves, Neanderthals were making ornaments.
Most of the ornaments were found here against that wall of the cave. Now, all of these belong to the same period of occupation, and at that time, the surface of the cave was at about this level here.
Neanderthals and modern humans were both creating ornaments at a crucial time in prehistory. It suggests they had similar skills. But that only deepens the mystery of the Neanderthals' strange disappearance.
If in the end we find out that Neanderthals were essentially no different from us, that changes the picture we have of the past and gives us a better understanding of what happened in human evolution and about the definition of our own place in that human evolution.
For Homo sapiens, ornaments had an importance that the Neanderthals didn't understand.
In our present day and age, we use ornamentations or jewelry as a way of telling people about our own identities, about our own status, perhaps about our wealth, perhaps about our age. So it's a way of telling other people either what you think about yourself or what other people should think about you. The important thing about ornaments is they're of no functional value. They're entirely of symbolic value. So if we find people suddenly making and wearing personal ornaments, then it must be a reflection that something new is happening in their minds. I think the appearance of this kind of thinking could have had a critical impact on the survival capacities of the modern humans in contrast to the Neanderthals.
For Homo sapiens, what started with ornaments would lead to a wide range of art and artifacts, all the products of deep symbolic thinking. This is the product of curiosity and reflection. It is the work of a survivor. In France, on the limestone walls of caves, we created haunting images of animals and men, possibly a way of gaining a semblance of control over nature. They were painted by people who had watched animals so long they had taken on their language and spirit. Art was a way of honoring a baffling and unpredictable existence. These are the images of the mysterious circumstances of being alive.
We can see that these people were thinking about not just the world that they were living in, but also other spiritual worlds, other realities, not just the physical reality of their day-to-day existence. And not only that, but they were using graphic ways of portraying those different realities. We do that in our art today. We do it in our archaeology. We do it in all sorts of different ways of thinking about other realities. Maybe these people who made these paintings so long ago were very much like ourselves today.
Science often concentrates on our physical evolution, but our cultural evolution is just as important. It's this that made our success, the union of brain and language and habits that enabled us to control our environment and to survive.
Dawn of Man is sponsored in part by Sun Microsystems. We're the dot in .com.
There comes a time in every man's life.
Welcome to the family, Jack.
When he must choose between doing what he's told.
Don't rock the boat, Jack.
And doing what is right.
If we don't get this company on the net, we're dead.
You're a loose cannon, Jack. You have no idea what you're up against.
In a world where you're only as good as your technology.
We're going with Sun.
I'm watching you, Jack. Loose cannon is my middle name.
Critical Decision. A dot in .com production.
Five-star meals from world-renowned chef Michelle Roux. Celebrity, the one cruise that puts dining in a whole new light. Celebrity Cruises. See life on a different level.
Hi, I'm Tammy. What do you look like?
I'll take it.
Me too.
Contenders, 3 continents, 1 winner, Lincoln LS. Motor Trend Car of the Year.
Answering 3,000 calls a day, New York City's EMTs know all too well the city never sleeps. Ride with paramedics next, then see Dawn of Man tonight on TLC. And for the rush online, go to discovery.com and click on TLC.
Imagine a taste of Key West less than an hour away. A place where you can relax by the pool or blast off across the river. Soak up some island spirit at the sandbar overlooking the beautiful Indian River and enjoy a wonderful dinner with someone special and then dance the night away. Or do nothing at all. It's all waiting for you at the Key West Inn at Captain Hiram's in Sebastian, a traveler's paradise where you can escape to unwind and have fun. Take a tour of Captain Hiram's Key West Inn online at hirams.com.
John Edward is a man with a singular gift. He communicates with the dead and reunites them with the living.
They may or may not come through with something that you're expecting to hear. I will tell you what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm feeling. Whatever I see, hear, or feel, I share with you. I don't hold anything back. Okay, I'm ready to begin.
What you're about to see is true. Witness the phenomenon. Crossing Over with John Edward. Part of the summer of sci-fi.
For modern humans, ornaments were not just adornments. They were life. And unlike the Neanderthals, Homo sapiens traded and exchanged ornamented items with each other all across Europe. As strangers in a strange land, they possibly felt the need to find and identify with their own kind. Unlike anyone who had come before them, they seemed to have been aware of who they were. For them, ornaments were a new kind of tool, allowing them to build up complex networks and allegiances across the vast distances of the world that they were now beginning to control.
These objects tell us that there were some sort of relationship between the groups of people living in different areas. And this is, in a certain way, a marker for a community on a large scale.
Ornaments bound modern humans together, but not the Neanderthals. Ornaments have been found at only 3 isolated Neanderthal sites. Perhaps Neanderthals simply copied what they saw, but didn't realize their importance.
It would just be an extraordinary coincidence to me if Neanderthals invented these things independently from themselves at precisely the same time that we know modern humans equipped with these ornaments were spreading across Europe. So on the grounds of coincidence, it seems to me highly unlikely that Neanderthals invented them for themselves.
The cold that swept through Europe was decisive. Homo sapiens had proved adaptable and resourceful. They were now to be found all over the landscape. But the Neanderthals had clung to their familiar, isolated valleys. They were stranded. One by one, their groups died out.
As one disappeared, the survivors had fewer communication with each other and with that one group, so the groups got smaller in number and smaller in members.
Unable to make contact with other groups of their own kind, for the Neanderthals, the effects of climate change were devastating.
The places where they managed to survive, one by one from north to south, got destroyed by the advancing cold. There was competition from the modern human beings. We don't know how serious that competition was, but it was certainly there. And eventually, the last holdouts themselves disappeared. Their adaptability never apparently improved very much, and they were gone.
change highlighted the differences between us. Under pressure, we were simply better able to adapt. But might humans have played a part in the extinction of the Neanderthals?
Put wings on an ordinary pad, and it's still an ordinary pad.
Put wings on Stay Free's 4-wall maxi,
And you've got superior protection.
only Stay Free has 4-wall protection and wings.
Superior protection against leaks.
For 4X gangsters, going straight.
Look, lady, special orders do upset us.
Was getting old.
Said the good times are gonna last forever.
I thought we'd be dead by now.
August 25th,
I want you to whack somebody.
the black market,
Like old times.
goes gray.
Your jello-eating days are over.
The Crew, rated PG-13, starts Friday, August 25th at a theater near you.
In a race to future markets.
Initiate startup.
Dawson, prepare to launch.
It's gonna be a wild ride.
Wow. Where technology means everything.
They're coming.
Hold. And you either have the power.
The server should have crashed by now.
Or you don't.
How many more hits can this dot take?
Captain, power's what the dot's all about.
Beyond the limits.
The power of sun technology is highly logical. I like it.
Your enterprise will like it too.
Discover your inner Lewis and Clark. Go RVing. Life's a trip. Visit an RV dealer or call for a free video.
Answering 3,000 calls a day, New York City's EMTs know all too well the city never sleeps. Ride with paramedics next, then see Dawn of Man tonight on TLC. And for the Rush Online, go to discovery.com and click on TLC.
Tuesday on TLC. Hit the streets of Los Angeles.
If you train here, you can deal with anything anywhere else in the world.
Then, follow TLC from the ER to the OR. The Operation, Tuesday on TLC.
TLC takes you into the maternity ward.
Here, we see everything. You name it.
Let's go, let's go, let's go!
You have to make fast decisions.
You're not only dealing with one life, you're dealing with two lives. Push, Mom! Maternity ward, Sunday at 8 on TLC.
In a world of suffering, music can make a difference.
You can reach anyone through music.
Stand and Be Counted, a 2-night television event August 21st and 22nd at 9 on TLC.
Hello, Meteor.
Hello, Meteor.
Have you heard about the website called discovery.com?
Discovery.com is my guidebook for life. I learned how to plant an herb garden, train my dog, and cure my dandruff.
I learned that most meteors burn up in Earth's atmosphere. Ah! The atmosphere! Ah!
The atmosphere!
This is where the Neanderthals met their end. As their last dwindling groups shrank in front of the human advance, there came a point where they could retreat no farther.
This cave is the westernmost Neanderthal site we know of anywhere. It must have been one of the last places where Neanderthals lived. When modern humans arrived, these Neanderthals had nowhere else to go. They had their backs against the sea. So they had no option but to interact.
In the small child skeleton found in Portugal, there may be clues as to what happened when we met. Living 3,000 years after the last Neanderthals had gone, its skeleton combined both modern and primitive features. The style of its burial was modern, but the proportion of its limbs was Neanderthal. The explanation could be painfully obvious.
So the situation is like this. We have Neanderthals living in Portugal about 28,000 years ago. We have this kid that died about 25,000 years ago and has a few very clear Neanderthal traits. The only explanation I can think of for this combination of features is that at about 28,000 years ago, when local Neanderthal populations encountered incoming modern humans that crossed the Pyrenees to enter Iberia, at about that time, there was significant interbreeding between the two. And if that was the case, then you cannot really say that Neanderthals went completely extinct. They just were absorbed, they became part, were assimilated by these modern human populations coming in from the east.
Certainly it's possible that a limited amount of interbreeding has taken place, and that when we go on in the future and study many more sequences in the genome than we've done so far, we will find evidence of a certain extent of interbreeding. So it's certainly possible that a few Neanderthal genes are still among us today. We just don't know yet.
I do know that there are Neanderthal-like characteristics that we still see in modern populations. My father, for example, was a heavy-set, short-limbed individual who may or may not have had Neanderthal genes in him. If he did, doesn't bother me. That's part of my genetic history.
Replacement of the Neanderthals was a long and winding road. It seems that in some places we even interbred. Still, when one species is as successful as ours, as we now know, there was only one way for all this to end.
I think it's important to realize that when modern humans moved out of Africa, they didn't just come here to Europe. They colonized all corners of the old world. They went to Asia, to the Near East, other parts of Africa. When they got there, there were other people living there. The interactions between modern humans and those other people we don't understand anywhere near as well as we do with the Neanderthals here, but they were there. And shortly after the anatomically modern humans arrived there, they became the dominant form.
Observant and adaptable. We found strength in shared communities. We invented an identity and developed an art and culture that fostered and protected that identity. We were phenomenal survivors. As we travel the world, we may have met with violence from or interbred with earlier hominids, but with always the same result. We are here, and they are not. The future began here when the last Neanderthal died. Then, for the first time in the 5 million years of our evolution, there was just one species of hominid left on the planet.
This has been a presentation of TLC and the BBC, world-class television.
If every minute becomes a work environment, there aren't a lot of ways to get away from it. And, you know, these thrill rides, they represent a way to get away totally and just have an amazing, out-of-this-world experience.
When modern humans emerged from Africa, they discovered they were not alone. Take the human journey, A Tale of Two Species, next. Then witness the creative explosion tonight on TLC. Find out more online. Go to discovery.com and click on TLC.
On TLC, relive the unbelievable. Oh my God. A lucky man shocks Oakland's ER. And on an all-new Code Blue, residents in training struggle for control. It's all here, Sunday at 8.
By evolutionary standards, modern humans are relatively new on the block of life, and yet our roots run deep into developments that produce similar creatures, cousins, close relations, most of whom fell by the wayside because they could not adapt to a changing and often threatening world. Nearly 130,000 years ago, our species, Homo sapiens, left their African birthplace and traveled north. Ultimately, they found themselves in a changeable world. The fickle climate of an ice age, running from frigid to warm, buffeted and tested this new species. These hunter-gatherers took on the challenge of finding food, keeping themselves warm, and providing for their children. To survive, they had to adapt to an increasingly harsh environment. But nothing could prepare them for an astonishing discovery. They thought they were the only people alive on Earth. But as they made their way up into the Middle East and Europe, they found they were not alone. Another people inhabited the rock shelters of these harsh environs. They were the Neanderthals, like humans, yet hauntingly different. They must have come by a completely separate path to this meeting place. The question is, what branch did they follow on the family tree? How did these mysterious people become fellow travelers on man's great journey in evolution? The first evidence that our ancestors had traveled there came from an expedition to Palestine in 1932. Dorothy Garrod, an English archaeologist, together with an American, Theodore McGowan, excavated a number of sites in the limestone outcrops of Mount Carmel. They discovered an ancient cemetery outside a cave known as School. It contained the remains of 10 skeletons. The best preserved skull belonged to a 35-year-old man buried alone. When the dating was concluded, the remains proved to be 100,000 years old. Though primitive in some structures, such as the brow ridges and protruding jaw, overall, the looks of the School people are modern linking them to us. These are the oldest known remains of Homo sapiens outside of Africa. But then, something bizarre happened. Just around the corner from school, there is another cave in the limestone cliff named Taboon. The body Dorothy Garrod found in there was very different. The bones of the Taboon woman were dated to the same period as the school man, around 100,000 years ago. And yet her skull revealed features that were much more primitive. By looking at the Taboon woman beside the school man, we can see that her skull has large double-arched brow ridges, a face that pushes forward, and a flatter skull. While the school man has the features of a modern human, a higher forehead, less protruding face, and a jutting chin. Who are these strangers, and where have they come from? Were they distant family, or were they some entirely different species? Until recently, nobody knew. Then a phenomenal discovery in the Atapuercan hills of northern Spain finally yielded answers to these questions. At a site known as Grandolina, archaeologists have unearthed a treasure trove of ancient bones. These 800,000-year-old fossils are unlike anything else found in Europe. But clues to their origins came from their teeth. Their complex root design is seen in only one other species at one other time. Homo ergaster, who lived in Africa 1 million years earlier. Ergaster, or working man, was a hominid, a member of the great family that includes apes and humans. An innovative tool user and a meat eater, Ergaster was the first species to explore the world. Not long after they appeared, they began the first great migration out of Africa. They populated the old world with their descendants, from Southeast Asia to Europe. These bones from Grandolina provide strong evidence for their existence here in Spain. While their teeth linked them to an African origin, their skull bones looked much more modern. What happened to these Grandolina people? A million years ago, there were no other hominids living in Ice Age Europe. The most likely explanation is that these people, the descendants of Homo ergaster, died out after they gave rise to yet another new species that emerged in Europe. They are called Homo heidelbergensis. These new people can be tracked over frozen wastes for the next 500,000 years. From 800,000 to 300,000 years ago, we begin to see glimmerings of an organized lifestyle. Across the European plains, roving groups of this new species, heidelbergensis, use caves and overhangs as temporary camps. Evidence from sites in southern Europe suggests they made shelters by using timber frames covered with animal hides. Until recently, the image of these early people had been murky. There was little evidence of whether the Heidelbergensis were systematically hunting game from these bases, or more often scavenging off the carcasses left by larger predators. But now, a new discovery has illuminated the lives of these people. Juan Luis Arzuaga has led the team excavating a site just hundreds of feet from Grandolina. They call the place Cima de los Huesos, the Pit of Bones. Each day, the archaeologists enter the cave and follow the same path taken by a mysterious people some 300,000 years ago.
No site is like the Cima de los Huesos site. Getting there every day, you have to spend half an hour to get in the real place. You have to crawl in some narrow passages, and you must go down a ladder. You are in the heart of this mountain. You are 55 meters below the surface. And finding the human fossils there after the travel, I cannot imagine a place more appealing, more striking, more shocking.
As they excavated, the scientists wondered how all these bones had come to rest in such a small, deeply concealed chamber. What was the secret behind this gruesome pit of bones? 300,000 years ago, an ancient people flung the corpses of their dead down a deep shaft. At the bottom of the pit, the bodies steadily piled up, preserved in clay. The pit of bones could be the first sign of ritual disposal. The 2,500 bones found here form the largest collection of hominid remains ever discovered. Since they began 20 years ago, the Spanish team have patiently extracted the skeletal remains of 33 men, women, and children, getting to know each one intimately. One died of infection, another was deaf, and one suffered a severe blow to the head. The body of evidence uncovered by Arzuaga and his team is completely reshaping the image of Heidelbergensis.
What we have discovered here is that they were very mighty. They had a large body mass. They were very, very strong people.
The heavy brow ridges, jutting face, and receding chin make the Heidelbergensis at Cima look much like the people needed to fill the lineage gap. These people are most likely the direct ancestors of the Neanderthals. The evolutionary journey of Ergaster from Africa to the Grandolina people in Spain can be tracked. Now the evidence links these people with Heidelbergensis at Cima and points towards the Neanderthals. And though there are no signs of Neanderthals in Africa or in East Asia, it was in the mid-19th century